evening, everyone. Wednesday again. We are flying along. Okay, we'll wait as usual for some people to get on. As you get on, please say hello to viewers. I can see how many people are watching, but I can't see who they are until they say hello. So tonight we've got a jam-packed information call for you. And hi Diana, I scripted stuff so I won't hopefully go off on a tangent. I have lots of studies if you want reference to them. We'll just wait for some more people to get on. Tarina, hi, I wasn't expecting you. I think you will enjoy tonight's call. Chelsea, Shannon, you will enjoy tonight's call. Hopefully you can stay on. Chelsea, we've got your information for your CBD. Jordan, hi. Samantha, hi. This is going to be a good call, so we'll just wait another second. Corey, hi. I was just thinking of you, Corey, believe it or not. I was thinking, I haven't heard from Corey all week. Apart from the group call message you sent me the other day. Tracy, hi. Okay. I'm sure there's a few more people that are going to hop on. Okay, so we're going to go into sleep. I know I speak about sleep a lot, but we need to have a proper understanding of sleep so that we can then go into, you wanted me to touch on CBD, Chelsea. I will touch a tiny bit on THC. I want to touch on barriers of entry and then any questions that people might have as well. Okay, we will just get started. Okay, I obviously speak about sleep a lot because sleep is probably the most important aspect of health. More so than nutrition and exercise. Nutrition can have, it has its place, of course. Exercise actually has a bigger influence on health regardless of nutrition. So if you just exercised and you didn't change nutrition and you didn't lose any weight, you would still reap health benefits from exercise. But sleep is number one, as I always say. Carla, I was waiting for you. Sleep is number one because sleep is where all the processes happen. And when I say processes, you will regularly hear me kind of wrap things up into simple forms, and I'll say sleep is where we do our healing and regeneration. And that's what happens. So if you're trying to build muscle, you're going to do that in your sleep. There is a lot of confusion about the anabolic window out there. Generally, you will not build muscle straight after the gym. You will build it all in your sleep. If you want to burn fat, you burn the majority of fat when you're asleep. If you want to build white blood cells or grow stem cells, well, sleep is where we grow stem cells, and stem cells then become whatever cell or tissue your body needs at the time. Maybe it's white blood cells, maybe you have an injury that you need to heal your knee or something. That all happens in sleep. So sleep is very important. Sleep is a big factor in detoxification. Not just detoxification of your body as you think of it, but also your brain. So last week we mentioned, I think it was last week, we mentioned your lymphatic system. So your lymphatic system runs from your feet up to your collarbone. So that's where you would detoxify toxins and chemicals from inside your body, from here down. They will go through your lymphatic system. And then you have your glymphatic system, which is in your head, in your brain. And the glymphatic system, it is your brain's own detoxification system, and your brain will shrink by about 60% when you sleep, so that glymphatic system can go in and do all the cleaning up and everything. When we sleep, that's also when we process whatever we've learned today and any memories, and then we clean up any amyloid plaque or inflammatory molecules that may have accumulated over the day. So sleep is very important for that kind of memory aspect and learning aspect of life. If you want to learn and you want to process and retain information, you need to prioritize sleep. And then sleep has a huge part in mental health. I think we all know this, but also in cravings and blood sugars, irritability, all that sort of stuff, because your main fuel source in your brain is sugar. It is sugar. It's the fastest, most bioavailable form of fuel for your brain. I know there's a lot of controversy or arguments out there from the keto fans that your brain prefers to burn fat for fuel. Well, it doesn't. Your brain prefers to burn sugar because it's faster and more bioavailable, and the speed your brain works at, it's click, click, click. You need a fast fuel source, but fat is a cleaner fuel source for your brain, but it takes a bit more time to get your brain into that kind of mode of burning fat. But the point I'm getting at is when you go asleep, those glycogen stores in your brain, they get refilled. So that when you wake up, your brain has loads of sugar and you're sharp and you can function optimally. Now, when I say sugar, I'm talking about these glycogen stores, these carbon bonds that your brain uses for energy. I don't want you thinking so much as, oh, I should eat loads of sugar and junk food because it'll help my brain work better. It won't, because there's obviously a caveat, and that's where brain fog comes in and insulin resistance of the brain. But when we sleep, your body is really smart and it refills these glycogen stores in your brain. So then you wake up and you're like, oh, that was a great sleep. I feel wonderful. Let's go. As the day goes on, you burn through those glycogen stores as you need to. And then by about 6 p.m., 6:30, you're starting to feel tired. You're starting to crash, which is perfectly normal. So then by the time the sun goes down, you've got that melatonin kicking in, your glycogen stores are empty, let's sleep, let's refill those glycogen stores. If you don't sleep, and this is one thing that many of us notice, is when you don't sleep well, then you end up not refilling these glycogen stores, so you don't have enough sugar or energy available for your brain the next day. So let's say halfway through the day, because you didn't refill those glycogen stores, now you've no sugar left, and now your brain's panicking, and now it takes over and you start getting sugar cravings because your brain's like, quick, I need some energy. So then you get these uncontrollable sugar cravings, you get irritability because your brain's struggling to work, and then you also end up with these blood sugar imbalances, which can lead you to think that you're hungry, but you're not. So that's that fake hunger. So sleep is way more important than people think. And there's one other important aspect, and I want to go into, because we haven't touched too much since my sleep podcasts ages ago, on the different stages of sleep and then how the circadian cycles work throughout the day. So I want to go through them. But there's a couple of you in the group, in the masters, like in the main group, that are struggling with severe inflammation. A couple of you injuries, back pain, some autoimmune issues, some other immunity issues happening. So severe chronic inflammation happening right now. The problem here is that if you're not sleeping, it's going to be very hard for you to address that inflammation, because when we sleep, that's where we clean up, we heal, we bring down inflammation, we get the job done. That's when we sleep. If you're not sleeping, though, it's going to be very hard for you to push down that inflammation. When I say sleeping, like sleeping optimally, if you're not sleeping optimally, it's going to be very hard for you to push down that inflammation and get maybe swelling down or back pain down or whatever it may be. One side note here that I just want to address, because Marlene asked me about this the other day, and I meant to say it to her, but I don't think I did. Oh, I sent her a post that I did on this. I think it was during the summer, and it's a video actually in the biohacking group, and it's titled, "Why is my pain worse in the morning?" So a lot of people that have autoimmune issues, they can wake up in more pain in the morning, and then they need that kind of warm-up phase, just move around and get everything moving, and then they feel better. That's because cortisol, your stress hormone, is an anti-inflammatory. And when you go asleep, as long as you're getting into really good anti-stress sleep, most of us, we push down cortisol when we're sleeping. Cortisol is gone when you're sleeping because that's when melatonin kicks in. So you don't have that anti-inflammatory aid / aspect working in your favor when you sleep. Like, you don't have the cortisol. That's why, like, you think of cortisone, prednisone, these are anti-inflammatory drugs or hormones. So they stop the pain. When you go asleep, you don't have cortisol. So when you wake up in the morning, it generally is where cortisol's pretty damn low, or it may be trying to peak a little, but you don't have that anti-inflammatory aspect, so you wake up and you're in more pain. But going on, so you have to sleep because, yeah, I know someone's going to ask, you don't have the cortisol anti-inflammatory when you're asleep. But when you're asleep, you have the healing and regeneration. You're cleaning up damaged cells, you're making new cells, you're detoxifying toxins, hormones, chemicals, plaque. Your body really is cleaning up whatever you made a mess of during the day, really. And that's where wash, rinse, repeat over days of optimizing sleep, you start to feel better and your inflammation comes down. So sleep is very important, especially for anyone with autoimmune issues, because if you don't get that inflammation down, then you're not going to get the cells working, the mitochondria are not going to work, the immune system's not going to work, so you're going to have a hard time fighting whatever disease or issue is going on there. Okay, so now we know, hey Jolene, Donnie, hi Donnie, I wasn't expecting. So your lymphatic system stops here at the collarbones, like, and it dumps then into the bloodstream. Erin, Amanda, Leanne, Carla, I already said hi, Tracy. Okay, so now that we've said that, let's look at the phases of sleep. So I posted a picture in this group chat earlier of the different stages of sleep. So you have your N1, your N2, N3, and then your REM sleep. So we're going to go through, and then you have your awake. So that's wakefulness, that's where you're in beta waves. So based on the frequency, just to help you understand, these frequencies are what is analyzed or have been analyzed when people sleep to say, oh look, these frequencies are changing during this time frame. So now we're going into a different stage of sleep. So I'll reshare the picture, but it is in the group chat. I'll reshare it in a while because I can't reshare when I'm on this. If anyone else wants to share, feel free to. So N1 is the first stage of your sleep. That's kind of where you're dozing off, you start to fall asleep. That's your sleep latency, where I'll usually ask people, like, how long does it take you to properly fall asleep? So that lasts, it's supposed to last about 10 minutes. This is where you're in theta waves, where they're slower and higher frequency than your alpha waves. So this is kind of that transitory phase from wakefulness to light sleep. And the sleeper then changes position frequently, and you're not in a deep sleep, but more of a meditative sleep at that stage. So that's your N1. That's as you start to transition into sleep when you get into bed. N2. This is your second stage, and this is where we can see sleep spindles. That's what they're called. So sleep this first stage is theta waves, your wake stage is your beta waves, and now the second stage is sleep spindles, which is 11 to 16 hertz, and this lasts about 20 to 30 minutes. And this is where you can have a period of light sleep. You know, many of us who track our sleep and it'll show light sleep. This is it. So this light sleep, there's little to no movement, your breathing is quiet. The second stage involves kind of periodic surges in brainwave frequency. So these are the sleep spindles. So your brain activity during the second stage is more active than the first stage, because you're starting to transition now into these deeper sleeps, and you may even kind of get some dreaming start to kick in at this stage here. So N3 is your third stage. This is where things start to get, I mean, all stages are very important, but this is where it starts to get really important. So your third stage, which is deep sleep, and this is where you have delta waves. And I don't expect anyone to remember the waves, I'm just telling you in case you're interested. Generally, the older you get, the less the duration is in deep sleep for older people. That's not definitive. There's things you can do to kind of hack that, but the research generally says, and there was no specific population they were looking at, this was generalized. It wasn't these are unhealthy people, these are healthy elderly people, or anything like that. It was generally elderly people experience a shorter duration by about 6 minutes. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it can make a difference depending on how much deep sleep you're getting already. If you're only getting 26 minutes of deep sleep a night, that 6 minutes is really going to make a difference. But if you're getting 90 minutes of deep sleep a night, it may not make too much of a difference. So this is your deep sleep where your breathing is stable. Any EEG readings here are slower delta waves. Your muscles are completely relaxed. Your pulse, and I speak about this a lot, your pulse, your body temperature, your heart rate, your blood pressure, they have all slowed down, so they've decreased. And at this stage, this is where your production of human growth hormone comes in. And I've spoke about the necessity of human growth hormone for so many things, but especially if you're trying to heal and regenerate anything. If you're trying to grow muscle, I think most people know you need human growth hormone, but you also need human growth hormone for fat burning. This is important. Deep sleep is very important for fat burning. And I'm going to kind of touch on how to optimize deep sleep in a few minutes. Most of you already know this, but it's just kind of to connect the dots and drive things home. So we've got the human growth hormone starts to drop and kick in here, and all these regenerative mechanisms start to get activated. At this stage, the sleeper or whoever's sleeping will not wake up if another person walks in the room. They're in deep sleep. And this is where your pulse and your blood pressure and your body temperature, your core temperature, they're all at their lowest. So deep sleep comes directly before our REM sleep. So REM sleep, super important. REM is more alpha and beta waves. So kind of back to that wakefulness, the same waves you would get there, but you're not awake. It's just your brain is a bit more active there. So the brain would be considered awake, but more in that kind of awake dream state kind of thing. So it's active, it's dreaming, it's processing, it's storing memories and all this. So at this stage, your body is asleep, but the muscles in your neck and your body, not only are you asleep, they're paralyzed at that stage. And it's being proposed that the reason you become paralyzed at this stage was it was a safety mechanism. I'm hesitant to say evolution, but we were designed this way, that when we went through this stage of sleep, that the body couldn't move, so that we couldn't be in these vibrant dreams and go wandering around the house believing we were fighting a dinosaur or whatever. So it is that safety mechanism. So during REM sleep, this is where you see people's eyes can be fluttering or moving under the eyelids, and this is where we get most of our sleep. And as a side note, because this comes up a lot and people, I do say it, but I think people miss it, because most of our REM sleep happens at the late stage in the morning. We see that most people do most of their dreaming between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. So usually those last kind of 2 to 3 hours of sleep, because as you go through all these sleep stages, the REM sleep gets bigger and bigger, the time frame, while the other stages of sleep, they get smaller and smaller. So by the time you're at the end of your sleep, your full sleep cycle, you're mostly in REM sleep at that stage. So that's why people will commonly say, I do most of my dreaming later in the morning or just before I get up. Yeah, that's what happens to all of us. That's the way it is. So the typical adult has an average of 4 to 5 REM stages every night. The first stage lasts about 10 minutes, and then the subsequent stages get longer and longer. They can be around 30 to 40 minutes. So REM sleep is really important for that regeneration, the storing of memories, even regeneration of the brain's nerve cells, so cleaning up and regrowth and shuttling stem cells to become new brain cells. So tests measuring the effect of sleep deprivation, and I did a couple of posts on this, have shown that REM sleep is absolutely indispensable, as deprivation leads to irritability, fatigue, memory loss, and reduced capacity for concentration. And as an interesting side note, babies, they mostly sleep in REM sleep. So on average, 50% of the 16 hours of sleep babies get, most of it's spent in REM sleep. So people are going to ask, well, how much sleep do I need? The general consensus, and please don't get scared because there's obviously individualities, the different influences on why you may or may not get into deep or REM sleep. If someone's getting up at 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m., you're going to be cutting into your REM sleep. So there's that. But generally, we're looking at an hour and a half or 90 minutes of deep sleep a night and 2 hours of REM sleep. Like, that would be optimal. That would be ideal. Most people don't get there. You obviously have to stack conditions in your favor to get there. You need to do a lot of work, but those would be the kind of general guidelines there. So 90 minutes for deep sleep and 2 hours for REM sleep. That would be to optimize everything. I've spoken a lot about how I prioritize sleep. Look, I'm in bed by 8:30, read my book, finish my tea, lights out, I'm asleep by 9, and then my alarm clock goes off 6, just before 6. So I try to get a lot of sleep. I still dream a lot because I go to bed earlier, so my stages, although they're pushed back, I still go through all my stages. But if I did have a lie-in till even 7 or 8, I'll have a lot more vivid dreams in that last hour or two instead of getting up at 6. But I still do dream a lot. But I've always said, if I want to be my best, if I want to have that memory recall, if I want to show up and perform, I have to prioritize sleep. So sleep is very important. So one other thing before I get on to the CBD and stuff is the circadian rhythm, because it directly influences our sleep. So I think we know, but I'll go through it again. Usually if somebody is going to bed, we'll say at 10 p.m., they start to get into their deepest sleep around 1 a.m., 2 a.m. That's where you kind of start getting into your fat burning and everything. So 1 a.m., 2 a.m., around that time. Then as the morning starts to come in and you start to get the dawn effect, cortisol generally starts to trickle in and spike from 6 to 8 a.m. So that's like alarm goes off, rooster crows, cock-a-doodle-doo, everyone get up, kids go, screaming, shouting, all the madness that happens in the morning. That's the time frame we have our highest peak of cortisol, and that kind of gets us up and going. And then as the day goes on, in an ideal situation, you're supposed to have your cortisol come down, like trickle down as you go through the day. So that around, and I say around because it's very generalized, everyone goes to bed at different times, around 6:30 p.m., that's where most of your cortisol should be gone, and melatonin starts to kick in at that stage. Melatonin secretion will stop then, usually just before you get into that deep sleep and you've kind of peaked there with your melatonin. So your sleep and wake cycles they will influence your ability to get into deep sleep, because if you have the biggest influencer on deep sleep, I know no one's going to want to hear this, but the biggest influencer on deep sleep is stress. So if your cortisol is supposed to come down, and I know we all have stress. It's a mess out there. Life is a mess. If we all had, in an ideal situation, our cortisol steadily come down as the day goes on, and then we get our melatonin, we'd all be happy, but we don't. Most of us, our cortisol comes down, then stress, it goes back up and down and up and down and up and down, and you could be up and down for the whole day. And even though you crash then at night and you track your sleep, you then look and like, oh my God, I was exhausted, I slept a full 8 hours, but how come I only got into 30 minutes of deep sleep? It's because that stress response. And that stress is not just like kids driving you nuts or work or anything. That stress can be your body is fighting an illness, it's under attack, or maybe you have severe back pain or knee pain or whatever. That can impede you from getting into deep sleep. One other thing that can stop you from getting into deep sleep, unfortunately for me tonight, is blue light exposure after sunset. For every 30 minutes of blue light exposure you get, you suppress melatonin by 90 minutes. That is what the research shows us. So if you watch a movie, if you're on your laptop like I am now, if you're on your phone, even an hour before bed and you don't have, say, red lights or night shift or blue light blockers or something on, then you're potentially suppressing your melatonin, so you're not getting into that deep, restorative, human growth hormone dump, fat burning sleep. That's not to say you can't burn fat, but you're just not optimizing things. So blue light, unfortunately, is one of them. So if there's any questions around that, let me know. So that then leads us into, was Chelsea's question or comment about CBD. And you had mentioned, Chelsea, I think you wanted my opinion on it. And you mentioned that sometimes when you're not feeling like you're going to have a good sleep, or you're having issues sleeping, or it's been a stressful day, you might take some CBD. CBD is obviously very popular nowadays. It's still not legal in the States, I believe, and definitely not legal in Ireland or England. It is in Amsterdam, has been for a long time. But Canada, when did CBD get legalized in Canada? Was it 2020 maybe? Anyway, so it's quite popular now. Everywhere you look, there's cannabis stores everywhere. So we have, most of the popularity is around CBD. So CBD is a cannabidiol, or CBD it's also known as a cannabinoid. So it's one of the two most abundant chemicals found in the cannabis plant, the other being THC. So THC is more our psychoactive component or chemical that is what people think when they think of marijuana or they want to get high. They're It's the THC that they're chasing there. So in THC, there's many different molecules, but there's one called the delta 9 THC, which is the neuroactive one. That's the one that people chase to get high. And then the delta 9, believe it or not, can also be used for nausea. It gets used with cancer patients and chemotherapy and stuff like that. But then you also have a delta 8 THC molecule, which is more for pain relief. So it's that kind of numbing aspect of things. You ever smoke weed and you just kind of feel numb, paralyzed? That's that THC, that delta 8 molecule. But CBD, that's a non-psychoactive chemical or cannabinoid that can be derived from either marijuana or hemp. You can get it from either. Now, the body can make cannabinoids by itself. We have cannabinoid receptors. We have class 1 and class 2. The class 1 receptors, they're typically found in your brain and your central nervous system. And then the class 2, they're more in the periphery. They go throughout the body. But CBD, that generally activates these class 2 receptors, whereas the THC activates the class 1s, so those in the brain and the central nervous system, that kind of numbing, calming effect. But CBD, it won't get you high. It won't even get you a little bit high. It is more relaxing, but it won't get you high. So there's a lot of science that shows the benefits of CBD. So they're not potential. It's not a may or this could help, this may help. These science has shown this is what it does. So it can help relieve pain naturally, alleviate anxiety and depression, reduce inflammation, help to fight cancer, not all cancers, but some cancers, improve sleep disorders, protects against neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's, and even Addison's, lowers incidence of diabetes. We'll touch on that a little bit because it's not what you think. I don't think. Promotes heart health, has anti-addiction properties. So back in Ireland, there was a lot of issues with heroin in Ireland when I was a teenager. And we used to, well, I think they still do. There was a lot of methadone clinics. So instead of heroin, they'd get their methadone, and that would hopefully, but it didn't work very well, if I'm honest, hopefully help people get off heroin and transition onto something lighter and then get off everything altogether. But then I think as I started getting into my 20s, that's when the research started to come out that that if you transitioned, I'm going to be bold and say junkies, people addicted to heroin, if you transition them off heroin onto drugs derived from THC or even just marijuana, they transitioned better and there was a better success rate. So that's that anti-addiction aspect of it. So how does CBD work? So our human body produces its own cannabinoids. Like I said, we have our endocannabinoid system, so that's our class 1 and class 2 receptors. So the endocannabinoid system is responsible for regulating a number of important biological processes through these class 1 and class 2 receptors. So the class 1 receptors, like I mentioned, they're most prevalent in the brain. You can get them in other parts of your body because you remember, like your central nervous system, your vagus nerve, it runs throughout your whole body, but they're most prominent in the brain. They deal mainly with coordination, pain, emotions, mood, appetite. So you know the munchies or the cravings you get from weed, that's from that CB1 or that class 1. And then the class 2 receptors are found more in the periphery, in the immune system, and they deal mainly with inflammation and pain. And that's important because when I mentioned a few minutes ago that the class 2 is more in the periphery and the class 1 are more in your brain and central nervous system, immediately people think, well, central nervous system, that's where I have all my stress, that's where all my inflammation is coming from, that's what I want to address. Well, yeah, but no, it's the CB2, so the class 2 receptors that the CBD stimulates. That's the one that the research shows us is more our anti-inflammatory pain aspect of the benefits that we want. So rather than binding directly to the receptors, CBD acts indirectly on the endocannabinoid system by telling the body how to use more of its own. So melatonin. I've spoken about melatonin a lot. I generally don't recommend melatonin. So melatonin, the research does show us that will downregulate your own production of melatonin. If you take melatonin, you're basically saying to your body, here's some melatonin. You don't need to make melatonin yourself. I'm going to do it for you. So your body's like, okay, I'm not going to do it anymore. Whereas CBD has the opposite effect. It basically triggers your body to make its own cannabinoids and use them better. Kind of like, I suppose, how, not to get too confusing, how you can stimulate PPAR receptors, your fat burning receptors, to work better by giving your body a tiny bit of fat. It's the same idea. If you give your body a little bit of fat, it triggers the PPAR receptors to burn more fat. So here, if you give your body a bit of the CBD, it stimulates the cannabinoid receptors to make more and use more of its own more efficiently. So this is what makes it kind of such a safe and effective natural treatment. And it is safe and effective. I don't talk about it a lot, it's not my thing, but it is safe and effective for most people. Not for everyone, for most people. So the fact that CBD doesn't bind directly to your receptors is also a probable explanation, for why it doesn't have the kind of psychoactive mind-altering effects that THC does. When it comes to sleep and anxiety, there is a lot of research out there. If you go looking, a lot of research supporting that CBD can improve sleep disorders. Because of the amount of research out there, this is why, well, partially why it was approved to be legalized and readily available for people. So I will touch on the anxiety aspect in a minute, but we'll go through the sleep first. So CBD has mostly relaxing anti-anxiety or anxiety reducing effects. So CBD could help some people that suffer with a lot of anxiety and adrenaline issues address their sleep disorders like insomnia and improve overall sleep quality. So it appears to have benefits over the THC found in marijuana, which generally THC, or if you smoke weed, it just helps you pass out, but it actually worsens your sleep over time. And THC does prevent the user from getting into REM sleep. I think most people know that, but it does. So there was a survey done, and I'm happy to share all the studies if you want to see any of them. There was a survey of 163 adults using medical marijuana showed that users with insomnia, they preferred strains much higher in CBD as a sleep aid because they found the THC, although it knocked them out, they didn't feel like they were getting good quality restorative sleep or feel refreshed. There's more research that suggests taking CBD before bed improves sleep in people with insomnia. A human study found that 15 milligrams of CBD appeared to have alerting properties during the day and had no discernible effects on lights off sleep. Another study showed that some users reported better sleep in a few hours after taking CBD. So CBD does help you fall asleep faster, and it doesn't seem to have a hit on REM sleep. But there doesn't seem to be any study saying you definitely won't get a hit on your REM sleep, because there may be instances of like cross-contamination or impure CBD. It's why it's important to go to a company that has a good reputation, efficacy, integrity. They're using organic, high-grade products, because you can get contaminated products or impure CBD. And I've seen in a few of my clients, because during all of my consultations, I'll say, hey, do you smoke or vape cannabis or CBD? And a few people will say, yeah, I use CBD gummies, and although it helped for a little bit, it really affected my sleep and they didn't dream. So it's a common thing that I have seen, that even some CBD strains, which makes me think that they are impure, can affect people dreaming, getting into that REM sleep, which is so important. You also don't seem to have the insomnia rebound effect when you stop, like you do with THC, or the dependency issues. So that's another benefit of CBD. You don't have these, when you stop THC, you can get severe insomnia rebound issues. And there's some evidence that CBD can help with PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, sleep problems. And there's one or two small studies showing that CBD may help with sleep apnea, but I would personally theorize that this is due to its effects on inflammation and blood sugars. Because when you look at sleep apnea, and a lot of research comes back to, most of the drivers of sleep apnea is inflammation and insulin resistance. It is now, there is an element that as you get older, your facial structure starts to collapse in on itself, as horrible as it sounds. But when that happens, the nasal cavity and all, they can start to compress and fall in on each other. So that plays part in sleep apnea. But most sleep apnea issues seem to be driven by inflammation and insulin resistance. So with the CBD benefits, it is a strong anti-inflammatory, and it can help with the diabetes, like I mentioned earlier, because in that kind of negative feedback loop, if you improve inflammation, you're going to inadvertently improve insulin resistance too, because inflammation drives insulin resistance drives inflammation. But if you can get the inflammation down, you can break that cycle and improve both. So another thing as well, THC, you can become addicted, and also you can adapt, so you start to need higher and higher and higher doses to get kind of the sleep benefits from THC, and then you have the addiction, so you have the dependency and problems coming off of it. You don't seem to have that issue with CBD, but in saying that, it does seem to be dose dependent. So the research is not very clear on what the optimal dose of CBD is. There have been some people that, or some researchers that have suggested that the use of CBD at a certain dose, specifically at a higher dose, is actually more wake promoting rather than sleep promoting. So you could be trying, we always want more is better. You could be trying this higher dose, saying my sleep is shit, I'm going to keep increasing the dose till it knocks me out, but inadvertently it's making things worse. So finding your sweet spot for CBD, it can be very individual. It can be very much tolerance, stress state, even body weight. Like, there's so many influences, so there's going to be some trial and error there, like there is generally with most things. And also there's some research that CBD, one of the ways it helps, apart from the inflammation and anti-anxiety aspect, is CBD decreases your core body temperature, which is thermoregulation. When you drop core body temperature, you sleep better. When we increase our body temperature, we sleep terrible. So think of refeed day. We have all this extra sugar, we have extra carbs, we have extra calories, maybe alcohol. We have all this faster burning fuel and we increase our body temperature and we sleep crap generally on refeed. And this is one of the ways that eating late in the evening, especially having like your bigger meals or your carbs in the evening, can increase core body temperature and then prevent you from getting into proper deep sleep. So right now, the greatest clinical evidence out there for CBD's efficacy is generally around anxiety, and I'm going to come back to that. We're making good time, I think. It's generally around anxiety, which according to Dr. Matthew Walker, who is an English or a professor out of the UK of England, and most of his research is done on sleep. According to him, this is what has the biggest impact on sleep. So CBD doesn't have a direct impact on sleep regulating centers, but instead has a secondary or a negative kind of feedback loop benefit of lowering your anxiety, lowering the core body temperature, which then lowers the sympathetic, so your fight and flight state or sympathetic response, and then shifts you into that parasympathetic sleep, rest and digest peaceful state. So it's the CBD is helping you get into that state. It's not directly impacting your sleep centers. Are there any side effects of CBD? CBD is generally well tolerated with prolonged use in most humans. Almost no significant side effects have been reported in medical trials. Some studies showed that CBD may cause mild to low blood pressure. This would be a concern in people that already have low blood pressure, and there's one or two of you in here that do have naturally low blood pressure. Some CBD may cause dehydration, dry mouth, lightheadedness, and even sedation if you're extra sensitive to it. So it's usually, most commonly, I think, used for anxiety, but at high doses, research shows us that CBD can actually trigger anxiety. And at these very high doses, it becomes less effective for anxiety and more effective for pain relief. So you kind of got to pick your poison there. So I mentioned there's a lot of benefits. I really think that it is the feedback loop of CBD pushes down inflammation, so it's very strong anti-inflammatory. CBD acts directly on the immune cells to trigger a variety of anti-inflammatory and antioxidant reactions. Research has shown, as much as I love vitamin C, that CBD can be a stronger antioxidant than vitamin C and even vitamin E. So we have that anti-inflammatory aspect. CBD also, for those of you with autoimmune issues or battling autoimmune symptoms right now, in the immune system, we have our T cells, which regulate our immune response by basically instructing other cells to behave in specific ways. One type of T cells is called our helper T cells, or they can be referred to as your TH cells, but we think of them as our helper T cells. So CBD can blunt TH1 or helper T cell 1 and TH2 dominance. Your TH1 and TH2 dominance is your inflammatory pathways found in the immune system that contributes to immune diseases. So CBD can help kind of shut off those pathways, helping to reduce your immune response or your symptoms, so helping to suppress that T cell dominance, which is very kind of dominant in issues such as psoriasis and Crohn's and rheumatoid arthritis, and then other neurodegenerative issues, even like MS. So we've got the inflammation aspect. I'm watching the time now. So anxiety. One of the biggest disruptors of sleep, and I say this a lot, one of the biggest disruptors of sleep is anxiety. When you hear someone say, I can't shut my brain off at night, or I wake up during the night and I struggle to fall back asleep, my brain starts racing, I'm thinking about everything and anything, and believe me, it happens to me too. That is anxiety. And that anxiety is generally triggered by adrenaline because you've kind of been running on adrenaline all day. The adrenaline then triggers your anxiety. And when you wake up during the night, then your brain starts racing and you can't turn it off for an hour or two. That is anxiety. I've directed a lot of people towards Michael E. Platt's book, Adrenaline Dominance. It's a great read. It's a small book. It's only, I don't know, maybe 200 pages. It's a great read to understand adrenaline and how prevalent it is in our society. And once you read the book, you're like, well, shit, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. We're all running around on adrenaline. Adrenaline and cortisol are sisters kind of thing. Adrenaline is kind of fight and flight, like the scream guys outside my window and my adrenaline kicks in and I scream to run away. That's adrenaline. That's not cortisol per se, but it generally is anxiety and adrenaline during the night that are going to mess up your sleep. You can't shut your brain off because you're running on anxiety. Most people have anxiety. People had anxiety before 2019, 2020 because normal stuff. Work, husbands, kids. And then we all got traumatized in those 3 years. Now more people, and this is out there in the research, more people than ever have issues with anxiety and adrenaline and insomnia and just panic attacks and social anxiety and all. More people than ever. So this, with the benefits that CBD has around anxiety, you can see how if it's so helpful with anxiety, this is part of how it really helps with sleep. And Chelsea, I think you'll agree that if you look at when you take it, it's been a higher stress, more anxious, adrenaline driven day. Going back to some of my normal recommendations for sleep being GABA, number one. GABA is the first thing I'll go to when I see anxiety, regardless if it's sleep but during the day. GABA stops anxiety. That's how it can help people sleep better because it stops the anxiety. Glycine, found in collagen, yes, it helps us go into deep sleep, but it is a calming amino acid. Glycine actually does impact the GABA receptors. We have Tulsi, we have our reishi, skullcap, bicalin. These all push down that stress, adrenaline, cortisol response. All these kind of hormones that drive our anxiety, these nutrients, these herbs, these molecules push down that. Now CBD does that. So it's all about addressing this anxiety that is an epidemic now in society. That rhymes. I didn't intend for that to rhyme at all. So when we look at the research around CBD, according to the World Health Organization, I have to say, whether or not you listen to them after the last few years, according to them, depression is the largest contributing factor is the largest contributing factor to disability worldwide, while anxiety comes in 6th place. I think sometimes you can't have one without the other. So a 2015 study proved that CBD induced rapid-acting antidepressant-like effects in a safe way. Another human study, a single dose of CBD reduced anxiety in a brain imaging study of 10 people with seasonal affective disorder. CBD reduced blood flow to parts of the limbic system that are often overactive in anxiety, while increasing blood flow to the posterior cingulate cortex, which is important for cognition and motivation. And then there was another human study, placed 24 people in a simulated public speaking test, so this kind of environment where you would have social anxiety. Participants who were administered CBD before the test showed significantly less anxiety, cognitive impairment, and discomfort in their speech performance compared to the placebo group. So there's a lot of research with CBD and anxiety, and that generally is where most of the prescriptions are going. It's to help people with anxiety, adrenaline, ADHD, if I might be so bold, and then sleep. But it really, I think, all comes back to the anxiety aspect of things. So now we've touched on all that. Chelsea, if you have a question, let me know. So I'm not against CBD. If it's your thing and it works for you, go for it. Make sure you're using a very clean product. You want it organic, you want it pure, you want to be going to a company that you trust, that has a good reputation. There's a few of these CBD shops that have popped up around even Airdrie that I'm like, these places are basically the Dollarama of CBD shops. Like, I wouldn't be buying my CBD here, so even if you pay a little bit more for a good quality CBD, then do that. And then just while we're here, so CBD, whether or not you get it in a tincture, an oil, some sprays, you can get sprays like sublinguals, or you can get tiny little gel caps. Those would be my preferred ways to take CBD. The gummies, I am not so much a fan of, and you probably know why, because most of them are made with fructose and glucose. If they're made with sucralose, then we're like, well, sucralose drives up anxiety, and I'm trying to take this to put down my anxiety. That's kind of contradictory. And then there's the sweetness aspect. So there's the sugar in the sweetness aspect. And if you're taking this before bed and you're taking sugar and you're spiking insulin, you might be sleeping better, but you're causing other problems. That's my concern around the gummies, is the sugar, blood sugar, insulin response aspect of things. So if I was to make a recommendation, it would be try stay more towards maybe the tinctures or the oils, or the tiny little gel drops that you can get, little balls, and just pop them in, and Bob's your uncle. Back in the day, believe it or not, I did smoke it, but I wouldn't recommend smoking it now if health is your goal, because whatever you smoke, it is going to have damaging effects on the lungs, regardless of how natural or whatever it is going to have effects on your lungs, and you need your lungs to last. Wow, I had no idea about all this. You're welcome. So if there's any questions, let me know. I want to just touch on, I have a whole list of studies. If anyone wants to see the studies, I have like 10 studies, I think. I'm happy to share them, but I know, here's the thing, it's one thing me knowing all the science and reading the research. Most people don't want to, or they don't need to, or they don't have the time to read. Once in a while you get like a client who really will look at everything, but most people don't. They just, most of you are at a stage where you trust me enough that you know I've looked at it and you trust what I'm saying. But the research is there if you want to see it. So the second thing I wanted to touch on tonight after sleep was kind of stacking conditions in your favor and optimizing for success. And where is it? Barriers of entry. So you may remember, when was it? last week, I think, uh, I did a post that basically we were looking at mindset and motivation. And I basically said in the post, a common mistake people make when starting a health journey or kind of getting back on track or going after their goals is they rely too much on motivation. And I've done other posts on this, like motivation will get you started, but it won't keep you going. It's more your inspiration, your determination, and kind of the power behind your why that keeps you going. Like, why am I doing this? What is fueling my fire? So motivation will get you started, but the why keeps you going. But most people tend to rely too much on motivation, and I see it all the time. You see it, we all see it. I would be negligible to not say I don't see that people start a journey, they start with me, they start the guide, and they're great for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and then their motivation starts to fizzle. And then I usually wonder, like, is their why strong enough? Were they ready, kind of thing? So your motivation eventually fades. And at that stage, people have underestimated the difficulty of their journey, and the journey is quite difficult. I can try and make it easier by kind of saying yes and no to certain things and giving you guidelines and giving you like, oh, I have a refeed day, rather than doing like a 21-day meal plan. You get breaks and you learn about flexibility and stuff like that. But most people underestimate the difficulty of a health and fat loss journey and the time frame as well. It takes quite a while, as you know. So it seems when we look at kind of stacking conditions in our favor and kind of making things easier on ourselves, the research shows us that when we create routines and habits, so we're not so self-reliant on this motivation and even willpower and self-control, we have a better kind of chance of outcome. I did post one study that it was titled Taking Stock of Self-Control, a meta-analysis of how trait self-control relates to a wide range of behaviors. Basically, the main value of self-control may lie more in creating the healthy habit than in regulating behavior each day. If you try to regulate your behavior day after day, it's going to get tiring. You're going to get fed up. You're going to say, oh, I'm sick of this. I just need a day off, which is where you get your refeed day. But it's tiring to constantly kind of keep yourself in line. It really is. If you, though, can kind of bypass some of that by creating routines and habits and stuff you just do, that you don't even need to think about, it then starts to stack conditions in your favor, like bookending your days, your morning and evening routine. You know, if the rest of the day goes to shit, at least if I did the morning and the evening routine, I'm still somewhat on track. I'm still somewhat like making the correct decisions, stacking conditions in my favor. I'm doing stuff that's beneficial to me. And then having these habits, like every day I go for a 30-minute walk after dinner, for example. If that's you and that's just what you do, that makes things so much easier. It becomes a habit. Maybe you enjoy that time. You feel better digesting your dinner. Maybe that's 30 minutes to talk to your partner or your kids and get the fresh air, and you enjoy it. Then that again is a habit that's going to lead you to success. So a lot of the research really shows us that if we can stack conditions in our favor that way, it makes success more likely. And I have been looking so much into success in the research, and not just success, long-term success. Because when I came across the studies a few weeks ago that 95% of people regain the weight, I was like, shit, 5%? Obviously I'm in the 5%, but like that doesn't look too good for the rest of the population. So we want to stack conditions in our favor. Routines, create habits. We've all heard of the the reference to we brush our teeth every day, we don't even think about it, it's just what we do. I do my makeup every day, I do my hair every day, it's just what I do. We want our habits around our food and our lifestyle choices to be like that, basically. There is also other research, apart from like barriers of entry, kind of doing small things consistently that makes you feel like you're achieving something, gives you the dopamine hit, helps you feel that pride, so that further encourages you to do more and stay on track more. So having like that lower barrier of entry, what can I do consistently every day that's easy enough for me to do? If you were to ask me, I would say, well, if you do your morning and evening routine and the basic eating style 5 to 6 days a week, I think that's easy. A lot of people do, but for some people that's not easy. That's too hard. So some people do need to pull it back a bit. What can I do consistently every day? Can I stop eating after 4:35 p.m. every day? Okay, that's what I'm going to focus on. So everyone's going to be different. There's benefits to doing everything all at once and pushing fat loss fast, there is, and then there's benefits to slow and steady. It's going to be individual. There is benefits to support both sides. But we look at the research, there's some other stuff that we can do. I shared on my personal page, maybe just after Christmas, the changes in the sizes of plates over the last 100 years. Our plate sizes are the biggest now they've ever been. So we're overeating. Our portion sizes are bigger. I've used the analogy of if you go to a restaurant with your husband, and my husband is twice the size of me. Like he is 6'2" or 3", and he weighs maybe 50 pounds more than I do. And he's bigger, like he's wider. I'm a woman, I'm small. If we go to, say, Milestones and we both order the same meal, the exact same meal, the waitress doesn't say to me, do you want the man's size or do you want the woman's size? No, they bring us both out the exact same size plate, and I'm expected, or someone, I don't know who's bloody expecting me, but I have the feeling that I'm expected to eat the whole plate, not the plate, like the whole serving, just like he is. But yeah, he's bigger than me, he has a bigger stomach than me, he has more room in his chest cavity than he doesn't have a uterus, he doesn't have like the smaller ribs, the frame. Men have more capacity for these big portions, but women, we're kind of led to believe like we should be eating the same amount, and we shouldn't. We definitely shouldn't, for so many reasons. But the plate size was one example. So a lot of people commented, well, I eat off a side plate or starter plate. That's what we call it in Ireland, a starter plate. So the little plate that I would give Roman, which a lot of people call like your salad or your side plate, that's the one I use. And it's just, I just do it. I've never really thought about it till now. It's just been habit. That's what I use. And when you kind of look, well, I have maintained successfully in the long term, so that's a trait of successful people, which the research shows that it is. There's also research based on the color of the plate can really influence how much you eat. So there was one study, and it looked at people who had, I think it was a red plate, and their food was red. Don't ask me, it's late in the day. Let's just say it was red cake. And because there was no real contrast there between the color of the red cake and the red plate, people ate more than if they had had that red cake on a white plate where you could see the contrast clearly. There's also that idea of out of sight, out of mind. There was a study done on a jar of M&Ms on the table in front of subjects, and if the jar was right there with no lid on it, the subjects were more likely to eat it. If they put a lid on the jar, So it was a transparent jar. They put a lid on the jar. Subjects were less likely, only by a small amount, but they were still less likely to eat the M&Ms. So that effort of taking off the lid influenced the amount that people would eat. Then they moved the M&Ms into, I think it was an opaque or a colored jar, so it wasn't transparent. You couldn't see the M&Ms inside it. And that percentage of people who ate the M&Ms, it dropped again. So there really is that kind of, if we make things more difficult for ourselves, even in simple ways, out of sight, out of mind, you just can't see it. The M&Ms might be there, but they're in a jar that you can't see them. That sends a loop, because humans are lazy. That's too much effort for me to go and take the lid off and get the M&Ms out. And if I put the M&Ms high up in the press where I can't see them and they're completely out of sight, out of mind, what do you think the chances are there that I'm going to get up? I'm small, climb up on the counter, go up to the press just to get the M&Ms. No, the chances of me doing that are small. I think someone else, maybe it was you, Jolene, you mentioned you don't keep specific treats in the house. Or maybe it was one of you said, you don't keep treats in the house. If you want it, you're going to walk to the shop and get it, but because that's too much hassle, you're not going to do it, therefore you're not having the treats. So there's that idea of don't keep it in your house, you can't have it. I mean, there will be stages, I'm sure, and there are people who do get desperate and they will drive and go and get it, or unfortunately now we have skipped the dishes and whatever, but it's that idea of changing your environment to stack conditions in your favor. If you do keep treats in your house for your kids, and I do, put them out of sight. That way, if you're not seeing them, they're not in your face, you're not thinking of them. So I have the treats in the closet for my kids. I have some chips and candy, and even if they don't see it, they don't generally ask for it, but I won't even think about it. But if a bag of chips is on the counter, I can see that's in my face. I'm definitely going to be more tempted. If there's a jar of candy on the counter, I'm going to be more tempted than if I have that jar of candy at the back of my closet because I know I want it for Saturday. There's pretty much no chance I'm going to go get that. I'll keep that till Saturday, but if it was here on the counter, then I will probably pick at it. So there's this whole concept, out of sight, out of mind. Make things more difficult for yourself in regards to getting treats, but make things easier for yourself in regards to good habits, and even rewarding yourself. Like Dr. Glenn Livingston said the other day on our second interview, like really telling yourself, how lucky am I that I get to eat this good food and nourish my body when some people in the world don't even have food. How lucky am I that I can go and exercise even though I don't want to. There's some people in the world that can't do anything, so that kind of attitude as well. How lucky am I that I get to eat this healthy food and do my body good and also have treats at the weekend and still see results. So there's that kind of mental shift too. So combining that with your sleep, maybe some of you are going to try CBD for your anxiety or your pain or your inflammation. We're going to put stuff out of sight, out of mind. We're going to create the good habits, wash, rinse, repeat, and we're all going to be successful like me. I really have been looking into this a lot. All of you in the Master's Guide, you may have noticed that I updated the Why Diets Work section this week. I'll have it finished hopefully by tomorrow. With successful traits and why diets fail, and I posted some studies and whatnot in there. I've really been looking into this because people get so far and then they just stop and they either regress or they just vanish into the distance. And I really want people to have not just success but long-term success. They're different. You can have success, but to have it in the long term for more than 3 to 5 years, that's what we want. And the research shows us that if people can keep their weight off for 3 to 5 years, then they're more likely to keep it off forever. Even the people that kept it off for a year, there was still a high chance that they would regain a lot of the weight. So the 3 to 5 years sounds like a long time, but it's not really. Some of you are with me since 2016 in here. If you can keep it off, then you have that success, and that's what I want you to have, because none of us want to go round and round and round in circles. How many times do you want to pay for a new teacher, a new coach, a new program, a new this? Like, it has to stop, and clearly we have a problem in society. So I'm really hoping I can help with that this year or over the next few months. So that was a lot. You have to run. Bye, gotta go. Okay, I hope you all found this helpful. I know I kind of went over a few minutes, kind of chatted a bit. I hope you found this helpful. If you've any questions, drop them below. If you want to see the studies, drop them below. That new module tab will be updated shortly. Hopefully you like it. And that's it. Everyone, we're going to go start our evening routines now, and I will chat to you all in the morning. So thank you everyone for joining, and good night. Bye bye.